All right, so this is starting to become a topic of discussion again, and basically, I just feel led to talk about it because it's like this topic of discussion keeps arising, especially because it's around, pretty sure it's like around election time or things like that. So, anyway, so we have this one side, and obviously, my videos before I continue are for women. I'm only here to teach women. So, anyway, so we have this one side where it's like they're worshiping the government, right? They're worshiping Trump or Biden, things like that, just putting mere humans that God is allowing, to be ruling over us. They're putting them above God. So we have that one side that's going too far. So obviously we're not supposed to have any gods, any people, or anything above him, right? And then we have the other side where it's like, so God's letting you see, hey, the government's corrupt and things like that. But then because they're like, the government's corrupt, they're like, well, I'm not going to obey them. They might even brag about like, oh, I don't pay taxes or, things like that. So then we have the other side going to the too extreme where they're like, I'm just not going to obey at all. So it's like either way, both are not in the middle. So like, what's the middle? What's the middle path in regards to the government? So when you read his word, it shows you that basically the leaders that we have today are all either due to our obedience or our disobedience to his commandments. So if we get good leaders, that's because we're obeying. But if we have bad ones, it's because we're disobeying his commandments. Because just like in Israel time, when they had like I think it's in the book of Kings where they were having the leaders and things like that. So they got good ones, right, when they were obeying. But as soon as if they started like transgressing or something like that, then eventually they would get these bad leaders. And it was just like a running theme throughout the book where if you like, because I think there's a few chapters where basically it talks about it, but it's showing you right there the reason why they were getting the leaders they have was either because they were obeying God or because they weren't obeying God. So in today's time, because the majority of the world, even believers, aren't obeying God. So because that's happening, we have the leaders in place that we have today. Like, yes, it's okay to recognize that the government we have today is corrupt. Okay, it's okay to say that, but also like you have to realize the why it's corrupt, and then it's also kind of like taking accountability for it because we all played a part in it, because at some point we are all disobeying, and that's the reason why we have the government that we have today. And so basically I can even give some testimony about this because there was a point where like years ago in like middle school and stuff like that where Yah was really letting me see the corruption in the government. And I had no idea that was what was happening. But when I look back now, he was letting me see it because I remember my friends at that time, they were saying stuff like, because it was around the time of like Trump's election, I think, in like 2016. And I was just like not having it. Like I could kind of like see through it. I just didn't fully understand. Like I never really cared to vote or anything like that. Even years ago, it's just kind of like, why? And then eventually, as he was starting to wake me up and like help me get into government, I was like, wow, like the leaders we have today is so corrupt. And I remember I was starting to get so mad at the government and then starting to speak out. I was even calling myself like an anarchist. And if you look that up, I don't even remember the definition, but basically it's one of those groups that are kind of like rebelling against the government and things like that. So I was calling myself that and all these things. And then eventually he was like, hey, you need to stop. Like he started showing me like, oh shoot. And then I was like, okay, like, oh, forgive me. Like then I started doing that. So there was a point I was like that. So that's why I guess I'm speaking about it, because it's really more so, I guess, well, I don't know. It's for both sides, but I feel like especially for the sides that think, oh, you're not to obey the government and things like that, when scripture shows us we are. So anyways, I'm going to start in Romans 13 because that's like one of the most blatant ones, basically showing that we're supposed to. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a few verses and then after that just go through some other scriptures to basically show, yes, we are to obey the government, even though they are corrupt. So let's get into it. Romans 13. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. So if you want to obey God, you're going to obey the government. Just like if a wife, right, is like in covenant and things like that, she's going to submit to her husband. And obviously, the only time where we don't is if they're causing us to transgress. So just like if the husband is like, I want to do Christmas or something like that too, because maybe he's not awake or something like that, then the wife would be like, no, I'm sorry, but I can't do that, because that's going against Yah's authority, and also not going against Yah's authority, but also going against the commandments and things like that. So when it breaks a commandment, that's when you are like, no, I'm not doing that. So say, for example, if the government was like starting to make it a requirement where everybody has to get a Christmas tree, or everybody, you must worship on Sunday, or things like that. When they start doing stuff like that, that's when you rebel and be like, no, I'm not doing that. But for example, if it's like the rules of the road, right? So if the speed limit says 50, you're going to go 50, and you're going to keep with it. Because I think there's also, depending on where you are, you're allowed to go maybe 5 above or 5 below, as long as you stay within the limit. So either way, if you're doing something like that, that's fine. It's where if you start, like, for example, going like 65, 70, or 80 and a 50, that's when you're transgressing the law. So that's an example of where you're to obey, because that's what they have it out there for a reason. Partially is because of safety, and I'm sure there's other reasons as well. But again, that's an example of when you obey. And again, this authority, this power is from God. It's not from man, so we have to obey. Again, unless if they make us transgress against one of the commandments. So let's keep going. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. So if you're resisting the governments that he put in place, then you're actually resisting him. Just like if a wife is not submissive to her husband, she's not really going against him, even though yes, she is, but she's also really going against God, because he has an ordained order. There's a certain way how you're supposed to be as a believer. Or just like, for example, if the children aren't obeying the parents, then it's like, yes, they're not listening to their parents, but they're ultimately not listening to God. Same thing with the government. And it even says, receive to themselves damnation. So this makes it pretty clear. Hey, you got to obey. So let's keep going. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Will thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. So if you do good, so if you're obeying the laws they put out, like, again, rules of the road. If you're just abiding by the 50 speed limit, there's nothing against you versus if you're not. You know what I mean? So that's what's basically saying. For he is the minister of God to thee for good, but if thou do which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. So if you transgress the law, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences for that transgression. Okay? So it's really good to just listen to what they say. Obviously, again, unless if it breaks his commandment. The speed limit going 50 is not breaking a commandment. So therefore, it's just like, just do the speed limit. Don't go above it. Because that's being rebellious, and God doesn't want us to be rebellious, right? So if you want to be a good servant, just listen. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Like, Paul's pretty much laying out pretty clear right here in regards to the rules for the government. So say you do break the speed limit, you're going 80 into 50. Say you don't get caught, you're still gonna think about it like, shoot, I kind of broke the law. You did break the law right there. So it's just better to just listen to what they say, so then that way it won't be on your conscience. Just do what they say. Again, unless if it goes against God, because obviously we obey God, not man. So if you want to obey God, then obey the governments, the leaders that he puts in place, because they're there for a reason. Okay, so before moving on completely from Romans 13, another thing as well, even when you look up the word subject, it means to be subordinate to, obey, to subject oneself to, and quite a few other definitions, but ultimately, even the word subject is showing, hey, you gotta obey the authorities that God puts in place because he's like, it's there for a reason. It's also one of those things that also kind of shows that we also shouldn't even be voting in the first place because at the end of the day, your vote's not going to really do anything because God's the one who decides who's going to be put in place. So no matter what, even if you vote, say you vote for Trump, if he wants Biden or somebody else to be put in place above him for, because of for whatever reason, he's going to put that person in place. So even your vote doesn't really count. All right, so now I'm going to continue on with 1 Peter 2:13 through 17. Another place that basically makes it blatantly clear you gotta obey the government, again, unless if they cause you to transgress, sorry. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the kings as supreme or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers. So the reason why, again, why do we have these leaders who, why do we have this corruption? It's part of our punishment for what? The transgression, to the 10 Commandments, being disobedient, being rebellious. He's like, you're going to be rebellious? Okay, fine. You're going to have these leaders. That's the way it is. And for the praise of them that do well. For this is the will of God, that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Right there, it's very clear that he wants us to be obedient to the government. And again, if you look up the word submit, it shows you are to obey. So another word that, sure, maybe they're not blatantly saying obey, but it's like, how else do you submit? By obedience. So that's what he's called for us to do. Again, unless if it transgresses a commandment. So another few verses are from 2 Peter 2:10 through 11, where it says, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despised government. And guess what? When you look up, or actually not look up, but even if you check out other versions, it says despise authority. So if you're despising the government, you're actually despising their authority. And then therefore, it's kind of one of those things you're kind of, without realizing it, despising God's authority because he's the one who put these leaders in place for a reason. Again, because we disobey. So he's like, hey, bad leaders for you. Like, if you really want good leaders, start keeping the 10 Commandments. If everyone did that, we wouldn't have bad leaders. It's as simple as that. Whereas angels, I didn't finish verse 10. Presumptuous are they, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. We're not supposed to speak evil against the government when God's the one who put them in place. Like, you're speaking against his authority when you do that without realizing it. Again, hello, we're not supposed to be that way. Whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before the Lord. Like, even the angels, the angels know the rules and stuff. Although I think this is more, this has to do more with the government, not with the government. I can't remember really what this has to do with, because I think the brothers have talked about this. But anyways, another example right there. You're not supposed to despise the authority. All right, another place, Jude 1:8 through 9. Or actually, it might be... Hold on. Sorry, it's actually Jude 1:8 through 11. But anyways, likewise, also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. Does not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuked thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally, as brute beasts. In those things they corrupt themselves. Woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of, and I think that's supposed to be Korah or Koresh, or I don't even remember. But anyway, it's just another example of we're not, because at the end of the day, even though, yes, the government is corrupt, these people are still like his servants, the good and the bad. people are his servants no matter what. So you're not supposed to be speaking against them. Just like, for example, David didn't speak against Saul. Because Saul, even though Saul was trying to kill David, that was still God's servant at the end of the day, even at one point. So it doesn't matter. You're not supposed to be like, he didn't, not even just speak evil. He didn't even kill him. He had two opportunities, right, to kill Saul because Saul was trying to kill him. Instead, he was just like, I will not touch Yah's anointed, or something like that is what he said. That's the way how we're supposed to be, similar with the government. And then a good example is we have Daniel. When he was in Babylon, what did he do? Did he speak against the government? Like, for example, in when was it? I think there's a chapter basically, and there is one, I just don't know, I can't remember exactly how it happens, but it's like the king, right, or something, makes it so that you have to like worship, I think it was like an idol of him or something at this certain hour, or I don't know, something like that in the story, right? You don't see Daniel going up to the king like, why are you making this law? Instead, what did he do? He prayed instead to God. He didn't worship the idol, so he didn't go against, it's like one of those things, like he was obeying God rather than man at that moment. He didn't go about rebuking the leader, because there was a reason why they had it. They went to Babylon exile because of their sins, their transgressions. Just like for us, how we're in captivity, exile. Right now we're in Babylon and things like that because of the wickedness we've done. There we go. Like, that's a perfect example of you got to obey. Daniel obeyed the government until until they try to get him to transgress a commandment, because again, we fear God, we obey God rather than man. So if they're trying to get you to sin, you're not going to obey that, obviously, because you have to obey God above man. So that's a perfect example right there. Boom, Daniel. So if you want to learn better how to obey the government we have in place today, go read what Daniel did all those times where they tried to get him to transgress. Obviously he didn't, but he also didn't speak out and rebuke the leaders either at that time. He just obeyed God. That's what we are supposed to be like. So I'm going to read one more thing, and it's from Matthew 22, and I'm going to start verse 15. Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. So they talk about Yeshua, how they can trap him. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of man. Tell us, therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? But Yeshua perceived their wickedness and said, Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, Who is this image in superscription? They say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left and went their way. So boom, even you have Yeshua saying, give unto Caesar. So whoever's in place today, give unto them what they're due. Again, unless if they cause you to transgress. There's even, I think, a chapter where Yeshua literally, I don't remember which disciple, but something in regards to paying tax or something like that. And then Yeshua's like, go get a fish, and out of it came the coin to pay the tax for him and Yeshua. So even Yeshua's right there showing, hey, you gotta, if there's taxes, if that's what the government, just give unto them what they're owed. Like, it's as simple as that. Again, unless if they cause you to transgress against the commandment, then you obey. He made it very clear how we're supposed to be in today's time. So we're not supposed to rail against the government. We're not supposed to speak evil against the government. We're not supposed to try and rebuke them and things like that. We have these leaders in place for a reason, because of our disobedience to God's commandments. So of course we're supposed to obey. Again, this is part of our punishment. We're in captivity, and it's not gonna be good until basically he restores everything back to the way how it's supposed to be. So instead of just speaking out, be like, I'm not going to obey the government at all, I'm not giving them taxes, or again going too far with it where you start idolizing them, just do your part as a believer. And then it's like, I don't know, it's just like one of those things. Like, he made it really simple. His instructions are pretty clear, especially in in Romans 13, and then in Peter, it's just showing you right there, just submit to the government. Just submit.